All right. Let's do a double dose. A double dose of donuts and a double dose of Sam Harris. I decided, you know what, maybe this channel will just be dedicated to video responses to Sam Harris. So I checked his latest video on his official YouTube channel. And it was from a few days ago. It's called The Reckoning. It's his response to the election results. He's very anti-Trump. He's always been pretty anti-Trump, to say the least. But I have some criticisms of the video, some things I agree on. Well, I guess maybe we'll start with the things I agree on. Probably should have taken some notes, but basically, I agree with, I don't know what percent, most of it, a lot of it. But it was strange to me how he starts the video off, he blames the far left for the election. But then as the video goes on, he totally pivots to like how awful Trump is, which, I mean, it's not that you can't hold both positions, plenty of people on the left or in the center disagree with the far left and also dislike Trump, and I don't think there's anything inherently contradictory about that. But there is something that seems to be a bit of a contradiction in terms of sort of where you're laying all the blame and animosity and sort of the inability to understand the Trump voter, and just kind of at the end of the day, you start by saying how the far left is all these negative things, that you seem to imply like it actually makes sense to have some serious grievances with the far left, but then there's just no ability to understand why someone would then vote against them. Even because you're also there's this assumption that Sam Harris has that everyone, well, at least in this video, is voting for Trump as opposed to against the left, which is not the case. A lot of people, their vote is more in the other direction too. Some people didn't vote for Harris, they voted against Trump, right? But it's almost like he falls into the same trap that the majority of the left seems to, or at least the far left, this lack of ability to understand their own issues, right? It's like, so he does see the ways in which the left's shit stinks, right? But then by the end of the video, you kind of get the sense that the whole blame or the whole sort of animosity, the only thing wrong in this country, really, it's kind of Trump and Trump voters. And I think, kind of connecting this to my last video, it's sort of this failure to see how different things are important to different people. Now, you might say, well, he's just saying that there's a different priority, that like the state of the democracy, right? If democracy is on the line, then we got to put sort of the toxicity of identity politics lower on the list of our agenda. But not everyone feels that way. Not everyone. Now, you might say, what? You don't care about that democracy being overthrown? And, there's different people are willing to gamble on certain things. So not everyone is in agreement that even if we go with most of what Sam Harris says, yes, Trump did this and this wrong, this and this are a problem, maybe you say, oh, you know what, maybe I see a 3% chance of these sort of worst fears coming to fruition. Okay, let's just go with that. No one, who knows, you might not agree. If you're on the right, you might think it's 0%, or if you're on the left, you might think it was 97%, whatever. But let's just say, for the sake of the point that I'm trying to make, let's say you felt like the worst possible things that Trump could do had a 3% chance of happening. But the things that you dislike about the left and the way that they're, not really even just in terms of just direct policy, but the way the culture is headed and how that affects people's interactions with each other, how that affects the sort of mood, and even things beyond that. But let's say you think that there's a 98% chance that continues in that direction as long as Democrats win. The point is that it's sort of for someone who presents himself as someone who kind of has a nuanced way of thinking, he's going to look on both sides. He's not going to just totally he's not going to be like, everything about the left is good, everything about the right's bad. He starts off the video listing, and you may agree or disagree. Plenty of people on the left will, left and the right will disagree with Sam Harris, and I do like that about him. But all these things about the left that are a problem, and to some of us, they're significant things, right? If you think the left sort of is, sympathetic at times to Hamas, or not harsh enough about them, how is that not something that's serious? If you feel that way, if you agree that's that's a big problem. If you, let's say, take it to the personal level, right? As I was trying to explain in the last video, people have their personal experiences that lead to their emotional priorities, right? All priorities, in a sense, are emotional in the end, whether or not you agree with that. But we won't go down that rabbit hole right here. But so let's say let's say you have a child and they're coming home to you and they're kind of like repeating sort of leftist weird ways of thinking about, like, they're confused about their gender, and right? And so even though Sam Harris acknowledges, okay, gender dysphoria seems to be a thing that happens, we should have sympathy, help them the way we can, we're still looking into the science and the best ways to handle these things, all that seems like a reasonable position to me. He also acknowledges that it's a social contagion, that there are kids that will get confused, and that it's biological men playing in women's sports is a problem, and so on. So that's one thing. So what if you're a parent and you see your child coming home and they're saying things that are concerning, that would affect their entire life, their entire well-being, and you're saying, well, there's something more important than that. Democracy is at stake. It might be Trump, he'll cause a civil war or whatever. Okay, so if your opinion is, though, that, okay, I don't like these things Trump did, but probably I don't really think that there will be a civil war. I think that's highly unlikely. If that's your assessment, which, like I said, maybe you disagree with that, but I think that's a position that could be understood, that if you think something is, your opinion is that it's an unlikely event or whatever, versus you see concerns about a culture that you find to be a problem. Take immigration. It's not particularly an issue that I'm overly concerned with in my day-to-day life, but for some people, maybe, what if you had a child that died of a drug overdose, and the drugs, came from, not having a strong border is what allowed the drugs to be prevalent in your community or something, right? I'm not particularly an expert on the opioid epidemic and how that relates to immigration, right? But you can understand how someone would have that point of view and how it would be a priority to them over sort of this idea of a worst case scenario of what Trump could do. There's maybe very realistic scenarios of things that are happening that concern people. Take the identity politics. Sam Harris acknowledges it's a very bad thing. He doesn't like it. He actually claims that it's dead. Now, that's a great thing, I think, if it's true, which I don't think it is true that it's dead. It's nice that he's declaring it so, maybe. But this is why some people would vote for Trump, right? Would you be saying identity politics? Would he be saying identity politics is dead if Trump lost? Would he even be talking about these things that are wrong with the left? No, and that's the whole thing. Some people voted for Trump so that you could say, oh, okay, what does the left need to do differently? What went wrong here? Whereas Sam Harris would not be talking about any of this. Maybe he would mention it here and there, right? But it wouldn't be the sort of post-election, reflection video. It wouldn't be about how identity politics and wokeness are a big problem and the left better change that if they want to win in the future, right? So this is why these things do matter to people, even if it's not Sam Harris's priority. And Sam Harris can have his position, obviously, while having a little bit more understanding of why people would vote the way they do. He seems at the end still to be baffled, like he can't connect the dots in a way, right? He even acknowledges that Trump got more support from minorities than any recent Republican candidate, right? and he can't figure out why. I mean, he seems like he can, but at the same time, it's sort of this sort of pompous attitude, like, oh, well, more minorities than ever voted for, or in recent history voted for a Republican candidate, but it must be for some kind of silly reason. Like, there's no justifying that. So it's sort of that lack of respect for the Trump voter, which doesn't really bring people in, if that is his goal, which I think it is, right? That's why he is, in a way. I think he is expressing the opinions he actually holds, I hope. But when you're having that conversation, you're starting it with basically all the things wrong with the far left, or you could just call it the left, I don't know. And then you immediately kind of throw all that under the oh, no, none of that really matters in the end. Trump is evil, Trump. You're sort of missing the point. And you're falling into the same traps, like I was saying before, the same trap of not understanding the problem. And, I was giving specific examples. Maybe you have a strong view of immigration because of this reason. Maybe you're worried about what your kids being taught in schools, and you have some reasons for that. Maybe you have an opinion about Hamas and the way the left, reacts to that. And then the straight white man thing, right? If you are a straight white man and the culture is becoming more and more sort of hostile to you, and you're sort of the only group that it's like seems to be like openly acceptable, at least in the like education system and institutions, and even in other contexts, to sort of openly mock, degrade, if it's causing, if sort of anti-male sentiments are causing tension between men and women, if women are sort of being taught that men are sort of the root of all their problems, and let's look at everything through the lens of toxic masculinity and all these things, right? But let's keep repeating the word patriarchy, which is another way of just saying men are the problem. It's not women, it's not humanity, it's just men. If you can't see the way that men in particular would find that message to be repugnant and a problem and sort of an existential threat, right? For men, that's an existential threat just as much as these other things. You can have the argument that that's absurd and ridiculous, just like someone who voted for Trump could think it's ridiculous to think that we really were, this close to having an all-out civil war. We could argue about these hypothetical scenarios and which is a real existential threat. But if you want to actually understand why Trump won, instead of just sort of casually listing the problems with the left that you pretend to take seriously and then quick revert it back to sort of blaming everyone that supported Trump, you should really actually fully understand the seriousness of some of these issues that people have with the left, that it's not just a trivial matter. It's not just about one sporting event, right? It's about the culture as a whole and how that affects people, how that affects their lives, how that affects people to get along with each other, right? And whether or not, you want to say which came first, the chicken or the egg, as far as sort of trying to stoke these tensions between these identity groups, I do think it's the left that's pushing this, right? If identity politics are really dead, then you won't get another Trump in the future. And so, all right. This 4 years of this, you learned your lesson, and there won't be another Trump because there won't be this reaction to identity politics. And from my perspective, Trump had to win to actually end identity politics, if that's actually going to happen, which Harris acknowledges himself, that because of the way Trump is, he's kind of says things that are inflammatory and so on, the left might choose to ignore these aspects of the reality and just double down on their identity politics. And that's the problem, right? Is that they can't get the message. And so if they can't get the message, then we'll keep sending a message until they do.